Okay? Solomon and David, two of the erstwhile kings of the Bible, okay? There is pretty substantial evidence that neither of these people ever lived. There never was a King David. There never was a King Solomon. And so what I pick up and what you should try to pick up is when you understand these two kings, they are two parts of your personality, okay? You have one David who is surrounded by war on all sides. And for the fact that he's surrounded by war on all sides, he cannot build the temple. And you have the other one, Solomon, whose name means peace, and he indeed builds the temple. So right away, you have an understanding that what this represents is the mind, the mind where the wars rage, the temple will never be constructed within, but where there is peace, then the temple can be built. Solomon built God's temple, according to the Bible, which is part of this allegory. But Solomon is a part of us that's very interesting, because what happened is, after he built the temple, as many of us do in our meditation, he became distracted by other things. He became distracted through himself, through the things around him, through the physical things around him, and he turned away from the temple, see? Because we all desire to have things, and that's fine, and I do too. But when we depend on our lower self instead of our higher self, then we are Solomon, and suddenly, even though we built the temple, we're too busy for the temple. But the point that I'm trying to make here is something happened to Solomon in this parable or this allegory. Something came between him and God. Something came between him and the divine mind in the same way that things come between me and meditation, or things come between you and meditation. Something happened. And the Bible has an extremely clever and beautiful way of identifying it. If you look with me, I think you'll find it very interesting. Go to page 303. It is 1 Kings, and it's chapter 10. Now, remember what I'm saying here, and this is why it's important for you to see for yourself. The Bible is not a history book. The Bible is not a book of drama. It's not written by a Tennessee Williams or you can think of some of the famous authors that you might have read about. It's something special. It's not something to be recited in churches. It's deeply mystical. And it tells you in no uncertain terms what goes on if you're only wise enough and have the eyes to open up and look. What got between Solomon and his ability to work the temple, and the same thing that gets between us. Page 303, 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 600, watch me, 3 score is 3 times 20, which is 60, and 6. What was it? 666. Do you see that? Do you see that? There is the identity, and if you'll add this out, as you know how to do, 6 plus 6 plus 6 equals 18, 1 plus 8 equals 9, which is consciousness, his mind. The mind, the gold of the lower mind, became so obsessive that he neglected the temple. Look at it again. It's in the book. It's in the book. 1 Kings chapter 10. Let's look at verse 23. Okay? King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom. Now all of the earth, which is the lower mind, okay, looks to the sought Solomon to hear his wisdom, which is put into his heart. See? This is what happens when you go into meditation. This is what happens when you overcome the 666. You come into that place of understanding. And take a look, if you would, at the book of Proverbs. And let me show you something. And if you'll look at Proverbs chapter 2, page 542, to be delivered out of the grasp of the mental problems and the things that cause us so much difficulty, you look at Proverbs chapter 2 and go to verse 16. To deliver you from the strange woman. Do you see that? To deliver you from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flatters with her words. In other words, that's the thoughts that come out of the mind. And so what we're saying here, that we understand something. The Bible's already told us through 666 that this is a question of consciousness. And that Solomon had wisdom because he knew, he received from the higher realms of the mind. Forget there was any such man like this. It's not talking about a man. It's talking about you. You have wisdom. You have enlightenment. You have understanding. But there's a problem here. And if you start taking direction from the strange woman, if you start intercoursing for the direction of your life from the lower mind, there's going to be trouble. It has nothing to do with a man named Solomon. It has to do with you and me. This is a psychology course that you're taking right now. It's a psychology course, and it's given by the supreme cosmic teacher of the ages. And he uses the names of Solomon and David to set up an allegorical way that you can think of a story. But forget these people. They had nothing to do with it. They didn't even exist. It's talking about you who come into that realm of meditation. You begin to understand the ways of peace. But now you turn to the strange woman, which means the emotions of the lower mind. 1 Kings on page, what page am I? 303. And let's go to chapter 11, verse 2. Of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, you shall not go into them. Okay? Neither shall they come unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. And all that's talking about is the lower mind. All that's talking about all the strange thoughts that come into your mind. All the strange, when you give heed to them, but it said Solomon clave unto these in love. See? In other words, what's being said here is no matter how much I can speak to you, no matter how much I can speak to myself, I find the same thing. In the mystical terms of the mind, there's always the strange woman. In the terms of knowing that you should spend that time in meditation, you should drop whatever you're doing, no matter when you're going to take up some kind of a course of action and go into meditation. There's a tendency to cleave onto those things which are physical to us. Because it's too difficult otherwise for us to sit and say, oh, well, I'll just give up everything and I'll just float off into nirvana and everything will come out right, see? But that's what's the problem, because when we cleave unto these types of things, we're cleaving unto the thoughts which come from the lower mind, and which causes trouble.